Welcome back to Inside the Designer Studio. Today we have a very special guest. And before we start, I'd like to say hello to my lovely co-host, Elliot Goldman, a very good friend. My name is Veronica Diaz. I just wanted to remind you to like and subscribe this video and hit the notification buttons so you can be updated with everything that we are uploading. Elliot, why don't you introduce our very special guest?
Good morning, Veronica. It's nice to see you again. You're looking great. I hope you enjoyed your European holiday. I first want to apologize to all our subscribers. The last 3 months have been a little complicated from a logistics point of view and for me, a health point of view. And I'm happy to say that everything has sort of worked its way out, and I hope it won't be another 3 months before we make another video. I'd like to introduce today a longtime friend and somebody that I really enjoy her company and talking to her. She has, in my experience, built a really successful company, and they're a company that makes some really interesting, unique, and very successful products. I want to introduce everyone. This is Karen Sumner from Transparent Audio. Good morning, Karen.
Good morning. You're looking well, Elliot. You know, I've been looking forward to this because I kind of think of you as the Howard Stern of audio, but you have a much nicer co-host.
I only wish I was that much successful. Howard Stern is. All the jokes, he's incredible interviewer and manages to get people to say and do things that I don't think they do anywhere else. And just as a side note, because you brought that up, because I wasn't aware of it, for those of you watching this, or even both of you if you haven't, I'm a Bruce Springsteen guy, and Howard did about a 2-hour interview with Bruce recently, and it was shown on HBO. And if you haven't seen it, I suggest you do. It's really fantastic. Anyway, that's off to another subject. So like I said, it's been a while since we've done these. I know that everybody's kind of been busy, and I hope everybody's well. And we're finally, at least in my opinion, post-COVID, although Florida's been post-COVID for a long time, other places haven't. And I hope that 2023 is going to be a turnaround year for the audio industry. Not that it's been bad, but just to get people back out, go to the shows, visit your dealers, and obviously enjoy some live music, which a lot of us haven't been able to do for a long time. Veronica, why don't you ask the first question?
Karen, before we start, I'd like to ask you, how did you start in the world of audio? How did you get interested in this in the first place?
Well, I was 13 years old, and I had been playing piano for 5 years, and I started picking up the guitar, and I really wanted music in our home. And so I prevailed upon my dad, who is a civil engineer with a strong mechanical engineering background and some electrical engineering. And we decided we would build a stereo. And so I helped him every step of the way and participated in the process. We built a Heath kit together, and we built a pair of speakers, which had they were very, very interesting because my dad was an engineer. We actually made a double wall construction and filled it with beach sand so that it was a very, very stiff, very dense and massive construction. And, you know, we bought our drivers from Radio Shack back then. You could get audio gear at Radio Shack that mattered instead of, you know, cheap little stuff that's manufactured that kids haul around. So, I mean, Radio Shacks were real audio shops back then. And we put together a turntable and, bought the parts, and we created a suspension and a box for it. And we built it all into an old TV cabinet, which really didn't look much different than this chest behind me. And we had a great time doing it. And I started buying records, all kinds of records, and I couldn't get enough music. And whether it was Streisand or Frank Sinatra or Charlie Musselwhite or Ravi Shankar or Joan Baez or Judy Collins or rock music, it didn't matter. I just wanted to get my hands on it. And I basically used to use this stereo system, which was actually quite good, every single day. And I had a pretty good musical ear, so I was able to pick up things by listening to it, and then I could play it and I could sing it. It was like I had my own personal karaoke training machine back then. And I actually used to listen to it so much, and the tubes would get so overheated in that cabinet that I was constantly blowing the thing up. And so I would take the tubes, take my bicycle with this little basket in the front, put the tubes in there, and go down to the hardware store and test the tubes. And I would get rid of the ones that I had blown up, and I would bring back new ones, and I would put it in the unit, and off I would go again, picking out another song to sing. So it was this wonderful melding at a relatively early age into technology and into music. And fortunately, my dad put up with me, and we had to keep it in the cabinet because my mom didn't want to look at all the stuff. And so I had to remember to turn it off, because if I didn't turn it off, or if I used it for too long a period of time, it would always blow up. So, but anyway, I started fixing amplifiers at the age of 13. And then I met my husband, Jack, and he was a serious audiophile and musician, and I just got so excited by it all. And and he thought he had met the perfect person. We've had to work things out over the last 43 years. We've done a pretty good job of it. But, that's how I actually got involved in high audio. And later we brought in our good partner for 43 years, which is a very interesting thing, to have three very different people work together toward a common goal and to accomplish what we accomplished. But our partner Carl Smith joined us, and he had this article that Peter Excel had written in the audio, and it was a review of a little amplifier in a way called a La Compagnie. First of all, not a terribly memorable name, but he said, this is probably the best amplifier in the world if you can get one. And so Jack and Carl and I were determined to get one. And Carl had Norwegian roots and was able to get a hold of one, and we struck up a relationship with them. They weren't doing anything in the United States at the time. They actually worked with a company called in Long Island called Eargasm, and it was kind of funny, but anyway, that wasn't going anywhere. He was also an Oriental rug seller. So anyway, the three of us got together, and we're very different people, but our intelligence and our interests mesh in a way that's very complementary. And so we started selling an amplifier, and we did a good job doing that and establishing trust in the marketplace and a name for our product, in spite of the fact that it was not very reliable in most environments. And, you know, we overcame that, and we sort of built a reputation for having really great sound and really great service. And that's basically how I met Elliot.
Yeah, that's when we met. We met with for the first time when I was at Lyric, and you had I don't remember the product, to be honest with you, it was so long ago, but I definitely remember Electro Compagnie. And you know, the funny thing about this, and I don't mean to diminish it, although as a woman, it was a little obviously a lot different for Karen than anybody else, because there weren't that many women. I'm not saying that women didn't like music. There was, I'm sure there were thousands and millions of them, but hi-fi another subject. But the story that a lot of people today don't understand is that when we were younger or young, you didn't have 1,000 channels of TV, and you didn't have the internet, and you didn't have all these other things. You had limited television, okay, in different markets, but music was, you know, from like my dad and, you know, Louis Prima records and Frank Sinatra, who my mother loved, and, you know, and most of us became Ed Sullivan children, and it was Ed Sullivan and the Beatles and the Stones and Elvis and the Animals and Herman's Hermits, all of the stuff that came on that changed my life. I mean, to begin with, it's like, although I had records and whatever, all of a sudden that blew open the world. It was like a nuclear bomb of music. I don't know how else to describe it.
It is.
That Sunday night when the Beatles came on, the world shook. I mean, it literally shook and changed. And from that, after, I wanted to play guitar, although I wasn't very good at it. And pretty much every weekend, I was at one record store or another, seeing whose new album came out, whether it was, you know, Zeppelin or The Who or Jethro Tull or later on, you know, whatever. And this became a habit for us rather than being glued to a tube or, you know, one of these things. And I think we all had that in common. And I think that love of music also was in my opinion, I ain't going to sound like an old fart, but was a really intellectual and educational exercise that I think opened the minds of a whole generation, even pre all the drug stuff, but that is probably missing from our world today, which is getting different points of view. And a lot of that came from music.
Well, it did. And the thing that I'm not ready to say that as an old fogey, I've got a handle on all of this. And I don't want to say that the younger generation doesn't understand, because in fact, I think that there are many more opportunities to get closer to music today than there were back then. I mean, we had records, and a few of us who were really dedicated had reel-to-reel tape machines and things like that. And it's a little bit nostalgia audio, and I love to go back to those things. But, you know, the fact is that with digital streaming and high resolution digital and DSD and DXD upsampling and all these other wonderful things we have access to, and the fact that you can go to Tidal and Rune and instantly download the top 50, 60 albums that were released the last month, according to Gramophone. And so, and according to everybody else, I mean, I love Gramophone because it's always giving me access to new cutting edge interpretations and performances of music I'm very familiar with, because I also, you know, having played piano from a fairly young age, I'm into all types of music, including classical music. And so there are these wonderful opportunities to have access to material that we actually didn't have back then. It's not to say that
I
nostalgia isn't good, but
it was more integral in most people's lives because they didn't have options. I think
That's right.
I agree with you. I think streaming, and I say this to all my clients, and when I write, I say it too. I think streaming is the greatest thing that's ever happened. I mean, it used to be hard. You had to go to a record store and search through albums and buy something from a cover and was sure if you liked it or you didn't like it. Now every week, Tidal and Qobuz have new releases, artists' new releases, and you can listen to stuff. And I find crazy stuff all the time that there's no way that I would have ever found that music if it wasn't for streaming.
Yes, and I
Yeah,
have a question for you too. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
I was just going to say that we wouldn't find it. And the thing is even at my advanced age, I am just so excited, so extremely excited about new music, and a little bit sad and weepy about the fact I can never listen to enough of it. I don't have enough time ahead of me to immerse myself in it to the extent that opportunities.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And I think that as a musician, you have an appreciation for recordings that are natural and that sound like you are actually there, closing your eyes. However, and technology is changing so much. Do any of you think that there's going to be soon audiophile grade music generated by artificial intelligence?
Oh, well, that's been going on for a long time. As a matter of fact, one of my good friends in the recording industry, Ed Tootin, puts, kind of pays the bills by taking electronically produced tracks and making music out of it. And he says it's mind-numbing work, but it pays well. So I have to do it. He also does a lot of other work, but there's a lot that already exists.
I think that I'll tell you a funny experience to me. This is a long time ago, but Stevie Wonder was one of the guys that really got into the Polyphonic Mood when it first came out. And I was married at the time, and my wife was playing piano, and we went to buy a piano. Okay. So we're at a store and she's playing different pianos, and being the person I am, there was a glass room that you're not supposed to go in. So while she's playing the piano, I opened in, walked in, and they had one of these big white Moog kind of things set up in there in like a studio. And my ability to play piano is slightly less than playing chopsticks well. But I sat in there, and you start playing with this thing, and you push a couple of buttons, and you push another couple of buttons, and you push another couple of buttons. And before you know it, I had a whole orchestra playing music in there. And truthfully, I know nothing, literally know nothing. And I don't see why. I'm not sure if this is good or bad. It's just a thing. I absolutely think that a lot of what you're listening to is created by machines. And as the machines get better and smarter, they'll be able to, especially if programmed well, be able to produce probably really interesting music.
Yeah, well, it's a different thing. And there are a whole group of audiophiles out there who basically specialize in totally electronically produced music and creating their own thing. Musicians as well as audiophiles. It's perfectly legitimate approach. I think people should do what they like to do as long as it doesn't harm others.
Right. EDM is a whole big thing. Okay, it may not be something that I listen to all the time, but it does sound really cool on hi-fi.
Yeah, and the better the hi-fi, the cooler it sounds.
Absolutely.
Better
The
separation.
the issue is putting together a better hi-fi and knowing when you have it, which is really where my career comes in, is helping people to figure that out.
And you've done a good job at it too.
Yes.
Well, so far.
So Karen, tell me, what sound do you love?
Well, years ago, I wrote a little essay for Harvey Rosenberg's book, The Search for Musical Ecstasy. And in it, I expressed the idea that my chapter expressed the idea that if audiophiles could allow themselves to disconnect from their temporal lobes and just allow their body to respond to the sound of what they were hearing, that they would be happier, that they could reach their objectives sooner. But that in fact is not what happens to people. And I just think that when I sit down and listen to something, if I can't get in a meditative state and, you know, relax my neck muscles and my shoulder muscles and be absorbed by the experience, I really don't want to listen to it. Unless, you know, if I'm listening to an iPhone to pick out an arrangement on something that I'd like to duplicate, I can do that because you can hear the notes. I mean, you know what it is. But if I'm going to sit down for the sake of entertainment, I want the music to wash over me in a way that makes me believe that I'm there. And fortunately, I've had enough experience with live instruments playing them and listening to them. I go to a lot of live acoustic music concerts still, and you know, I know what that feels like, and it's more of a feeling than it is anything else, than identifying a particular kind of sound, because there's actually a wide range of sound that one could achieve to get to the point of relaxation and release and connecting with whatever it is you're listening to, rather than thinking about the equipment.
And Karen, is there any sound that you dislike or barely tolerate?
I tend to like this is really funny. I'm sorry. Some people are going to really disagree with me. I tend to like the sound of most consumer-oriented gear. In other words, pre-thought out stuff, like, you know, setups that, you know, the speaker and the amplification, everything's been designed to go together. And that is what is generally available to consumers. It's not a high-end thing, but what it does do is it does provide an accurate, a sense of the real tonal balance of what instruments sound like. And the only sound I really don't like and have to walk away from, some of it, you know, elevator music, it's pretty pleasant. It's tonally okay. You know, boombox music, if you don't play it louder than then it can safely play without distortion, that's pretty good. Typical systems are good. 60, 70 systems are good. 60 systems from the 60s and 70s are good tonally. The biggest problem I have is that the new equipment has the ability to provide us with a lot more than tonal pleasantness. And so that in the hands of people who want effects, they just create things that to me just don't allow me to sit back and, you know, release all the physical tension, open up my mind and my heart to the music experience. And so I think the biggest thing is that these systems tend to emphasize these other things like dynamic range or whatever the person's sense of spatiality is, and they throw the essential part, you know, the essential part is given a back seat. And actually what the balancing act is, I think, to creating good sound is to have realistic tonal balance of human voices and live acoustic instruments. And if you don't have that, you can forget about the rest. But the problem is that getting the rest is a lot more complex and a lot more difficult than not anybody, but a lot of people, they don't want to recognize that. You know, they think they can just put in a well-reviewed component and end up with a better result. And that's not, unfortunately, that's not really what happens in our hobby. You know, I have learned that over the last 43 years.
Veronica, I think that Karen's brought up something interesting, and if you don't mind, I want to explore it a little bit more and maybe get off script, because I talk about this too, and I kind of feel this, that there's hearing and then there's listening, and I know that what you described is kind of what I like also. I'm not saying I don't do casual listening, because that's not true. I drive in my car sometimes, and I listen to different music in my car than I probably do in my listening room most of the time. When I'm driving, I kind of like upbeat stuff and stuff that I don't have to pay serious attention to. Maybe I
Right.
can sing along with or whatever. But for example, I'll listen to a lot more country and rock and roll kind of stuff in my car. It's not to say I never listen to that in my sound room, but I listen to less of it. And I also believe that, and there are a lot of factors to this which we could talk about, but when you have and I'm going to use this word and emphasize it because I really believe in it, when you have a system which is a culmination of all the things that you have in your room, including your room and where you sit and the cabling and the equipment and whatever it is, all the pieces, and it's all set up correctly and it's all treated correctly, then there is an emotional thing, an emotional component, a realism meter, whatever you want to call.
Mhm.
When it's doing it right, it sucks you in and it immerses you and allows you to feel something, whether that's relaxation or excitement or wonder or joy or horror or fear or whatever it is, depending on what the music is trying to do. And I think that the industry as a whole, not Transparent or Karen Sumner or whatever, has done a really bad job of communicating that and spent a lot of time discussing things that people want to hold on to, like frequency response and power requirements and all kinds of technical advances, which I'm not saying they don't matter, but it's not them that creates what I call the high end and what I call this amazement factor, this wonder factor. And the equipment has gotten better, and I totally agree with you. We've for years been able to do this, and over time we've done this and this and this, meaning we've expanded it out. And what this technology has done, and advanced manufacturing techniques and better materials have managed to remove or pull away more of what we don't want from the music and allow us to hear more of it. And
Right.
so my point of this is that there are different kinds of listening. To me, I casually listen or I listen, okay? I think there are a lot of people in our industry / hobby / whatever you want to call it that know how to hear. We all can hear, but they never learned how to listen. And I'll just leave it at that, and I want to transfer it to you. We all know how to eat. Doesn't mean you all know how to cook, okay? Even musicians, the best musicians, don't necessarily tune their own instrument, okay? You can buy a Formula One car, doesn't make you a race car driver. You can be a race car driver, doesn't make you competitive. You can be competitive, it doesn't make you a winner. There are levels of all of this stuff. And
That's right.
And I think that one of the sad things to me, and I see it all the time now at the shows and on YouTube, is people listening to things on the same narrow-minded pieces of music. Nothing they're bad, but they're highly produced. The Keith Don't Goes of the world and the Private Investigations and all of that, which may be great music, but there's nothing there that's really live. There's nothing there that differentiates what we're doing, okay?
Well, it's interesting. It's an interesting point that you bring up, because I've explained to many of our partners whom we work with out there, dealers, distributors, industry friends, that we're the only high-end industry that I know where the stuff comes in a kit, and you don't have everything you need in the kit to create the experience. You can't, no matter how great a mechanic you think you are, you're not going to get a complete kit for a Ferrari.
Thomas Keller, you cook your own dinner.
Yeah, but we expect people who don't have much experience with what music actually sounds like, and they're just in the exploratory phase, and the only source of information they have is somebody touting this great thing or that great thing, when in fact where the pedal meets the metal is how it all comes together. And people's rooms and tastes are so varied that there are no prescriptions. It's wholly a custom business. And the issue is that if somebody goes into it and they think they don't need manufacturers who are established and have done their homework, and they don't need dealers who are established and have done their homework, it's a very long, expensive, winding path to get to the promised land. It really, really is. And you may never get there, and you will spend thousands and thousands and thousands of tens of thousands of dollars that you didn't need to spend. Because the thing that our industry has let people down on is to understand, what's the real truth? Well, the real truth is that your listening room is probably your most important component, and it will be the thing that limits your ability or helps your ability to reach the ultimate experience. It's, and when you get to that point, yeah.
Say that again, because that, again, I talk about it to my customers and friends. You only listen to all of it. You don't listen to, oh, that's the greatest phono cartridge I ever heard. What
right.
Connect, okay? Say it again, please.
Well, I will try. I'll try to say it again, but what I meant was you are limited by how far you can feed up on the audio chain by your listening environment. Well, I said, people go ahead and they spend, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars on a new speaker or amplifier, and they think that's going to be their solution. And then they put it in a room that basically is a big resonator, and you're not going to get the intended result by doing that. So, and I'm not an expert on acoustics, but I have had the benefit of having access to rooms that are acoustically very, very superior in terms of being able to hear what you're playing in the room.
I have a question for you, Karen.
Yeah. For another big thing, without fixing the problem that they had to begin with.
Right.
Right. No problem. So, Karen, I know you mentioned the room, you mentioned what I can interpret as the synergy of the whole system. But let's say that we have a customer, and that customer has set up everything, and that customer still feels that there's something missing. From your line of products, what would be the most essential product that you would say a person, you should have this?
Well, I can't really answer that, because one of the things is I'm not one of these flashy marketing people. I'm basically a mechanic, a scientist, and a visual person. I'm an artist, and I can't really speak for other people. You know, I would have to go to that place and I would have to hear what this person was talking about, because language is really very inadequate to describe these things. And that's why people need ears. They need people to visit them. They need people to help them. And, you know, I've heard a lot of systems in homes, a lot of systems at shows and dealerships. And you can find, let's just say, you can find probably half a dozen, maybe a dozen albums or songs that sound great on a particular system, and they will not sound good on another system, because what happens is because of interactions of the room and interactions of all the components, you know, certain things aren't going to sound good in a typical listening situation. And so short of really knowing what a listening situation is and what the components are in there, in that system, and what the types of music are that the person likes to listen to, I couldn't begin to hazard a guess.
Fair enough. Elliot, next question, please.
Well, even just to finish this a little bit more, you know, in a room, you can have problems that the room creates, and then you can also have problems that the person who owns the room creates. And so I agree with you. Sometimes, you know, just to use an obvious example, you could play a piece of music that had on a system that, let's say, has a big bass suck out, but the recording is really boosted in the bass, and so it sounds good in that room and no other place. So
Right.
Anyway, do you have an idol or a hero in the audio business? And if so, how did that happen? And who is that person or persons?
Oh, well, it would be hard to pick, but you know, I think I'd have to say that I love Bob Ludwig. And he's not in our industry per se, but he's been very influential. And I doubt if there's an album out there that doesn't have his name attached to it in some way that's been coming out for the last 15 or 20 years. And he's an avid audiophile. You know, he's one of these people who's active in the Audio Engineering Society, and he gave us a vote of confidence very early in his career, and we work with him and we talk with him and exchange ideas about recording and sound and music. And so he's been very, very influential to me. And you know, there are a few people from audio history that were important to me and gave me kernels of wisdom that I thought have been quite valuable. And you know, I actually like Irving Fried a lot. And his designs with transmission line speakers and his concepts about cabling and all of these things have been things that got me very, very interested in audio in the first place. So,
Veronica?
Karen, what do you think is the biggest myth in high-end audio?
well, that's an interesting question. I think we've touched upon it, and it's that if you get this brand new cartridge that was reviewed to be the best thing ever, and you put it in your system, it's not necessarily going to give you that result. That it really is not a component. It's an entire system, and it's an entire system in a room. And rooms have real limitations in terms of what they do to the sound. So
I think we spent an awful lot of time in this industry. You and I go back kind of contemporaries about, you know, early on you had Stereo Review and High Fidelity magazine, and from that outgrowth of just marketing, we got Gordon Holt and Harry Pearson, which changed things dramatically. And I think both of them, I mean, I can admit it all the time that these were guys that were very, very influential and teaching me most of what I know about audio. I just think that, unfortunately, it didn't really change much from that. You know, Harry wasn't a technical guy. I didn't really know Gordon Holt very well. You know, Harry was Harry. He was a music lover and a serious hobbyist without much technical background. And again, I go back to, I think the industry, and I don't know why this is, or although I have my own theory, why it really hasn't changed and why it hasn't grown into helping it. It's just, it seems like everybody's in their own little world, and it's very competitive, and it's very hard to cross into somebody else's boundary. First of all, I want to thank you for joining us. This has been great. I could talk to you for hours. I really enjoy it. And I just say a couple of things, and I have one last question. If you ever get the opportunity to go to Transparent Audio, anybody out there, it's really a cool place. And Karen has, I assume you still have it, an amazing listening room.
I have two, actually.
Well, I wasn't going to invite people to your house, but at the
Well, that's right. That takes special clearance, Elliot, which you have.
Okay, well, thank you. I've been to her house, and I've also been to the factory a few times, and they have a great listening room. And I implore people, I really implore people, if you really want to understand hi-fi and audio, try to get yourself in a place where you can listen to what's possible. Okay. Some dealers have it, some don't. Again, this is not trying to criticize anybody. It takes an awful lot of work. Running a store is hard. There's probably more product in stores that should be, but that's another subject. But getting the opportunity, whether it's at Karen's house or someone else, or factory, or someone else that has, Magical or Wilson, I don't really know. I haven't been to all of them, where you get to hear what a system is capable of. It's really like hearing live music for the first time. I'm not comparing them. It's just like your first great meal. It opens up a door, okay? And without understanding that, it's hard to understand what audio can do. I want to ask you, where do you see yourself and your company in the near future? I know you're kind of stepping back or stepped back. I'm not sure. You could define.
Well, I am older than dirt, so no, I think it would be understandable.
I'm older than you, so you're not older than dirt.
So, well, in 5 years, one of the principles on which we founded our company was really to find, the three founders found each other, and we think very differently, but we all think outside of the box, and everything tends to mesh. And that's what provided the foundation for us to build this company. And we've tried to, and we put an excellent team in place with those principles in mind. And so we have think out of the box people, highly creative people, design people, business oriented people. We have them all there. And, one of the things is, Jack and I certainly could have sailed off into the sunset quite a few years ago, but what we really wanted to do was to leave a legacy that was repeatable for the next generation. And I'm sure they're going to make it into their own thing, but they've got a very strong foundation on which to build. And they all embrace our mission to help everybody create better systems, since a good system does not come with a manual these days. So that's really what we want to do. And whatever the industry throws at us in terms of technology or interface challenges, these are things that we're fully ready and able and excited about embracing in the future, regardless of how much we're involved personally. So.
And Karen, I'd like to thank you not only for being here in this interview, but also for your contribution to the audio industry and for being an inspiration for women in the industry. I like just to ask you quickly if you felt in any point of your career that it was different for you because of your gender.
Well, of course it was. You know, one of the things that I brought to the table is I'm pretty unflappable. And so there's a shock and awe factor to that. So I really have a lot of wonderful friends in the industry, and I've received a tremendous amount of support. And you know, when there were situations that I felt I couldn't deal with it as effectively, I sent one of my guys in to do it. So it worked out fine.
You mind
I
if
can see that.
You mind if I tell a quick story?
Sure.
Okay. I have to give Karen, first of all, like I said, we're friends, and I really do like her. And part of this came from this particular story, and she's a tough person, and I give her a lot of credit for that. I remember one day she comes walking into Lyric carrying a Samsonite briefcase and wanting to see Mike K. Okay, Mike is an older Greek gentleman, ran Lyric. Lyric at the time was considered really the temple of the high end around the world. This is before the real explosion of high end all over the place. And although Mike was a sweetheart and a big pussycat, he had this demeanor that he was very off-putting to people at the beginning. He sort of would start a fight with you to become your friend. I think it's a Greek thing. I don't really know. Anyway, but he comes in and she's there, and I assume Karen had an appointment because she probably wouldn't have just walked in. And she's waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And I don't know what the hell Mike is doing, but I think this is part of a sexist kind of thing, that he was trying to create the situation of dominance or whatever. Anyway, so I felt bad. And I went over and I talked to her, and she opened up the briefcase. And in the briefcase was a single pair of MIT shotgun interconnects, which was a brand new product. I don't know what year that was. Maybe you would know better than I. And so I said, well, let's try them. And I walked into, Lyric had 5 sound rooms, and I walked into a room and I plugged them in, and you know, my eyeballs opened. It's like, wow, this is really something different and good and special, right? I thought. And I told her that night I happened to be going to Harry's house, and I asked her if I could borrow the cables and bring them to Harry, of which she said yes. And that kind of, the rest of that is kind of history of what happened. And to be honest with you, I don't know, did Mike ever talk to you that day? I don't even remember.
Oh, I think so. I think so. I had the most wonderful first experience with Mike. That was before that MIT meeting, which must have been 86 or 87, but it was in 81 or 82 that I walked in with this little electroaccompagnated amplifier, and he had the new quads there, the ESLs, and we hooked it up to that. And of course, that was a perfect match at the time. And we listened to Melina McCurry play folk songs, and Mike was crying. And I looked at him and I said, I have goosebumps. And then he says, well, that's the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
So I understand the softer side of Mike.
And that's when the audio industry was so much fun. Every week was a new discovery. Every audio show was, you know, interesting and funny and crazy at the same time, because there was a lot of really weird and strange people, and even weird and stranger products. But
we're still weird.
Yeah,
that's
we're
our part of
still
our
here.
charm.
Some of us survived, yes.
Thank you very, very much for doing this. I hope that we maybe get a chance to do it again in the future on a different subject. Veronica, it was a pleasure seeing you again.
The pleasure is all mine, guys.